We are living in an era obsessed with manicured appearances and soullessly polished veneers. It is a world where people constantly edit their image, weigh every word, and strain to don the cloak of perfection as if it were the only ticket to recognition. But there is a cold truth that few dare to face. That very perfection is often bland, while what truly captivates the mind lies in the cracks, the shadows, and the rawest parts of ourselves that we desperately try to hide. Carl Jung once touched upon this essence, noting that humans are not truly drawn to the flawless, but are moved by what is raw, vivid, and so real that it cannot be faked. The deepest magnetism has never come from how eloquently you speak, how skillfully you perform, or how perfect an image you project. It comes from a stillness vast enough to sit beneath all of that. It comes from the ability to be fully present without begging for attention, from an aura that is neither loud nor pretentious, yet leaves a lasting resonance long after you have left the room. There are those who need to do almost nothing to impress, for their very presence carries an invisible weight. That is not a technique. That is depth. The Stoics saw through this thousands of years ago. Marcus Aurelius did not write to conquer the masses. He wrote to scrutinize his own soul. Epictetus did not chase the gaze of others. He turned inward to master his internal world. When you root yourself deeply enough into your core, you no longer live under the jurisdiction of anyone's judgment. You do not need the world's permission to be strong. You do not need applause to know your worth. From that moment on, your significance no longer lies in what you strive to prove, but in what you quietly become. If these words touch a hidden place within you, if you are weary of the performances out there and begin to crave something more authentic, then perhaps this is where you belong. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment about a shadow you once felt forced to hide, and share this video with someone who needs a wake-up call. Together, we are building Stoic Journey, a space with no filters, no pretense, only truth, depth, and the journey back to oneself. And now, prepare to remove the first mask, because what is about to be revealed may completely change how you perceive your true value. Part 1. Stop being the edited version of yourself. We live like perpetual editors, constantly pruning our own being. We retouch our emotions as if editing a photograph, smoothing out the jagged edges, concealing the rawest parts, and presenting only a version that is digestible to the world. A forced smile appears when the soul is weary. A quick, "I'm fine," is uttered not because it is true, but because it is easier than admitting exhaustion. Initially, these concessions seem harmless, but when the performance lasts too long, you eventually lose the memory of your own true face. You trade your authenticity for a few hollow nods and fragile validations until one day, even those feel empty. Recall the times you sat in a crowd, swallowing an opinion just to avoid friction, or suppressing your enthusiasm for fear of being too much or unrefined. That isn't social grace. That is the moment you chisel away at your own soul to fit the narrow mold cast by others. Carl Jung once touched upon a profound truth. The greatest privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not a version convenient for your parents, pleasant for your friends, or compliant with the expectations of society. True power does not reside in a smooth, perfect, and harmless image. It is born from a self that is scarred and contradictory, yet resolutely authentic. What gives a person depth is not how well they hide, but how daringly they live. Perhaps that is why Socrates' question still carries such weight. Where are you performing just to be accepted? Do not be quick to despise that weakness. Nearly everyone has betrayed themselves for the sake of safety. What is required is not self-reproach, but the courage to look at the cracks in your identity, the places where you quietly swapped truth for temporary peace. It is there that the journey back to yourself truly begins. Epictetus reminds us that freedom is not doing whatever we want, but refusing to be governed by external gazes and expectations. So, before you speak a word that isn't yours, before you shrink yourself to please another, pause and ask, is this truly me, or just the shadow others want to see? That question may be small, but if answered honestly, it can save you from a lifetime of living out of alignment. When you stop bending yourself to fit into others' comfort zones, some relationships will naturally wither. Those who only loved your mask will drift away. This is not a loss, it is a necessary filtration. It clears the space for genuine connections, for those who see you, understand you, and cherish you without demanding you shrink. Self-respect never starts by building walls. It begins with uncompromising honesty with oneself. And once you have the courage to shatter that shell of pretense, you will face an even deeper challenge. How to keep growing without dropping the soul you just fought so hard to reclaim. Part 2. Maturing without losing the soul. The journey of transformation carries a subtle trap. We often mistake adaptation for growth. We call it maturing, but frequently it is merely bending ourselves to fit a social mold. Every time you alter your interests, your speech, or even your aura just to blend into a new group, or don a cold, distant persona to survive a competitive environment, that is not evolution. It is a tiring act of mimicry. Forced integration only changes the surface. True maturity must make you belong to yourself more deeply. Genuine maturity isn't about demolishing yourself to build a new person from scratch. It is like upgrading an outdated operating system. You remain you, keeping your core intact, but you begin to purge the glitched programs that have silently controlled your life. The habit of people-pleasing, the reflex of silence to avoid conflict, or the fear of rejection that makes you withdraw before anyone can hurt you. Jung called this individuation, the process of stripping away identities built on fear so the true self can emerge. In hindsight, you will realize that many things that once helped you survive are now keeping you stuck. Humility, reserve, or the habit of hiding emotions might have been necessary armor at one point. But not everything that once protected you deserves to be carried forever. Survival mechanisms, if not discarded in time, become chains. Maturity, therefore, is not about hating who you are now. It is about having a profound respect for yourself, loving yourself enough to refuse to live in a form that has become too small. To grow without losing your soul, you don't need more masks. You need absolute honesty. Socrates left us a ruthless yet liberating principle. The unexamined life is not worth living. Observe the repetitive patterns in how you react, how you concede, and how you shrink for validation. See clearly where you traded core values for quietude. And then, cut the compromise. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. True transformation happens quietly, without the need for applause. The price of authentic growth is always a certain solitude. People will leave, not because you've become worse, but because you've become less controllable. They don't miss you. They miss the version of you that was silent and compliant. Let them go. A clear sign that you are nearing your true self is when inner peace becomes more vital than external approval. You no longer feel the frantic need to explain, to prove yourself right, or to panic when misunderstood. From that foundation, you enter a deeper stage, learning not to hide your scars, but to turn them into the sharpest edge of your inimitable character. Part 3. Transforming flaws into your ultimate weapon. We have been conditioned to believe a beautiful but exhausting illusion, that to be loved, respected, or remembered, we must be flawless. We try to smooth every edge, hide the coarseness, and bury the failures that make us feel ashamed. But in doing so, we lose what makes us real. Perfection may command a brief glance, but it rarely stirs the soul. What truly moves people is the breath of life, the cracks, the struggles, the collapses, and the way one quietly stands back up. A person's true light does not shine from polished achievements, but from how they carry their history. A rugged past, an oversensitive heart, a bitter failure, or a period you wish to erase, these do not make you less than. Often they are exactly what define a depth that cannot be replicated. Jung noted a cold truth. What you resist persists. What you accept loses its power over you. Your scars don't diminish your value. They prove you've walked through fire and are still here. The most terrifying thing isn't having been broken, it's living an entire life as if you must apologize for those breaks. We hide them for fear of being judged, fear that others will see we aren't as perfect as the image we've projected. But the more we hide, the more power we give the world to judge us. Epictetus reminds us that events do not define a man. His response to them does. A life of substance is not one untouched by impact, but one that has been struck, pained, and scarred, yet refused to turn bitter or surrender. Stop wasting energy bleaching yourself for the world's eyes. Socrates didn't teach us to be perfect. He forced us to be honest. The deepest magnetism of a human being lies in the tranquility of no longer running from oneself. When someone can look directly at their unhealed, imperfect parts without excuses or self-pity, they create a rare kind of gravity. It is the weight of truth. Nothing is more magnetic than a person who is no longer ashamed of having been hurt. When you stop viewing your flaws as weaknesses to be hidden, they become your ultimate weapon. Not because suffering is noble in itself, but because honesty about what you've endured creates a depth that no perfect veneer can match. Yet, even after reaching this truth, many still deplete their value by a different paradox. They take this hard-won authenticity and lay it at the feet of others, begging to be chosen. And that is where the next question arises. How do we end the hunger for validation, stop living as a beggar for affection, and reclaim the lead in every relationship? Part 4. Stop longing to be chosen. Become the one who chooses. Many live their entire lives with a silent, lingering hunger, the craving to be chosen. From childhood, we are conditioned to raise our hands and wait to be called, believing our value is only confirmed when someone else notices, accepts, or keeps us. As we grow, this habit doesn't vanish. It simply takes on more sophisticated forms. We enter relationships, workplaces, and social circles with the mindset of a beggar for validation. We try to be more pleasant, less troublesome, and easier to love, just to trade our essence for a sliver of attention or a fleeting sense of belonging. But the moment you place your value in the hands of others, you forfeit your power. There is a cold truth we must all learn. When you live in a state of waiting to be chosen, you will always be in a position of inferiority. At that point, you are not connecting with others through freedom, but through a discreet plea. You are no longer present as a whole being, but as someone secretly begging to be retained. The more you long to be picked, the more you accept things you never should. Draining relationships, exploitative environments, or breadcrumbs of affection. The price of always wanting someone to choose you is that you eventually forget you also have the right to choose. True transformation begins when you invert the question. Instead of agonizing over whether they like you, calmly ask, is this person worthy of a place in my life? Not everyone who appears has the right to touch your inner world. Not everyone who knocks should be invited in. Seneca spoke of the quality of a free person. They do not beg for a sense of belonging. Your time, presence, trust, and energy are not commodities to be bargained away. They are precious spiritual assets that must be given with clarity, not out of a hunger for recognition. Inner power does not lie in making everyone want you. It lies in the calm ability to say no to what no longer aligns with your dignity. When you stop chasing the gaze of others, your aura changes. You become less hurried, less prone to over-explaining, and less desperate to impress. You no longer enter a room wondering if you will be accepted, but observing whether that space is worthy of your energy. This shift creates a gravity that no performance can ever replicate. Part 5. The power of silence. Letting peace speak instead of explanation. There is a paradox that one only understands after enough life impacts. The most potent weapon is not always words, but often silence. We are taught that strength means having a sharp comeback, an unshakable argument, or the ability to dominate a conversation. But the longer you live, the more you realize that most hurried voices are born from insecurity. True strength is quiet. It does not rush to prove itself. It does not feel the frantic need to justify its existence. Marcus Aurelius, despite holding supreme power, did not use words for empty display. He wrote to himself as a way to keep his inner world from being swept away by the noise of the world. This is the hallmark of deep maturity, when your inner peace speaks louder than your need to be understood. Think back to the times you were misunderstood or provoked. Instinct urges us to settle the score, to explain until the truth is proven. But frequently, this haste drags us down to the level of the chaos itself. A person who truly masters themselves does not react to every arrow of criticism as if it held the power to decide their worth. They know when to be silent, not out of weakness, but because they understand that not every battle is worth entering. Some attacks only survive if you feed them your energy. Some arguments only persist because you still hope to be understood by someone who has no intention of understanding you. This kind of silence is not avoidance. It is supreme self-governance. It is the ability to stand still under pressure without allowing others to pull you off your axis. When you are rooted in what you know is true, you lose the need to apologize for your existence. You no longer grant others the jurisdiction to decide whether you are valuable. Power no longer lies in making everyone agree with you. It lies in the ability to remain serene, even when they don't. Silence, however, does not make you cold or unfeeling. It is not a stone wall. On the contrary, beneath that calm exterior is an inner life so deep and authentic that it does not require constant exhibition. The stiller the lake's surface, the more we forget the powerful current flowing beneath. From this depth, another quality begins to form: the ability to live with emotion authentically without being controlled by it. Part 6. Living intensely and deeply without apology. We grow up in a world that silently teaches us to be moderate. Don't feel too deeply. Don't react too strongly. Don't reveal too much. Be just pleasant enough to not cause discomfort, just bland enough to avoid notice, and just safe enough to avoid being labeled as too much. Consequently, many learn to shrink themselves. They swallow their emotions and suppress the most vivid parts of their souls just to appear composed and integratable. But the price of this misplaced restraint is a life increasingly alienated from its own heartbeat. There are moments when you are moved by a story, an idea, or a longing that is larger than what those around you consider normal. Immediately, the world tries to teach you to dial down that intensity. They call you sensitive, complex, or exhausting. But the truth is, a person who feels deeply is not broken. They are intensely alive. Carl Jung noted that no awakening comes without pain. This means that your capacity to feel deeply is exactly what allows you to touch the most authentic layers of existence. Pain is not always a sign of weakness. Often, it is proof that your capacity for resonance remains intact. Perhaps you've sat in a group where the laughter was loud, but you felt entirely out of place. Not because you were isolated, but because your depth found no resonance. Your enthusiasm hit a wall of superficiality. In those moments, instinct tells us to dim our light to fit in. But you must remember, just because something makes others uncomfortable doesn't mean it is wrong. People don't avoid you because you are too much. They avoid you because your authenticity exposes the hollowness in themselves. Marcus Aurelius did not teach us to stifle emotions to be strong. He taught us to understand them so we aren't led astray by them. Maturity is not about extinguishing the inner fire to become cold. It is about keeping that fire burning bright without letting it consume you. You were not born to dilute your soul to fit the narrow limits of others. Those who truly belong in your life will not ask you to be less vibrant or less sincere so they can feel comfortable. They will meet you at that depth. When you stop apologizing for the intensity of your life, you will realize a vital lesson. If you want to keep that flame from being extinguished, you must learn to build boundaries clear enough, wise enough, and sometimes cold enough to protect the most precious parts of yourself. Part 7. Maintaining standards without guilt. Boundaries are often misunderstood. They do not spring from arrogance, let alone resentment. They are formed the moment you truly recognize the value of your own life and refuse to trade your inner peace for half measures. When this clarity dawns, a strange thing happens. You stop compromising. Toxic cycles that once repeated, one-sided relationships and exhausting conversations suddenly lose their power. It isn't that the world changed first. It is that you stopped providing it with the convenience of your self-abandonment. Epictetus offered a sharp principle. If the price of keeping someone is betraying yourself, then that price is always too high. Those who truly understand this are rarely loud. They do not shout to announce their boundaries. They do not turn dignity into a performance. They simply quietly depart from places that continuously diminish them. That silence is their strength. For a person who is no longer manipulated by guilt, no longer tethered by hollow promises or familiar pangs of remorse, is a person who is very difficult to control. Many think boundaries are cold walls built to shut the world out. In reality, a boundary is a filter. It exists not to isolate you, but to protect your most precious essence from that which is no longer worthy. It helps you distinguish those who come with sincerity from those who come merely to deplete your energy, time, and kindness. Not everyone who entered your life has earned the right to stay. And just because someone was once familiar doesn't mean they are granted a perpetual license to hurt you. Stop asking if you are demanding too much. Instead, ask, why have I become so accustomed to accepting so little? You are not being unrealistic by expecting consistency, respect, and honesty. Those are not high standards. They are the minimum requirements for any healthy connection. When self-respect becomes a habit, saying no to toxicity becomes as natural as breathing. You are not being heartless by leaving. You are simply refusing to be an accomplice in your own depletion. Part 8. Turning the departure of others into a filter for value. The departure of another often triggers panic, not necessarily because of their loss, but because being left behind makes us immediately doubt our own worth. We have been conditioned to view every parting as an indictment, as if the one who stays must inherently be the one at fault. But a cold truth reveals itself only when you are mature enough to face it. Not every departure is a loss. Some people can only remain as long as you continue to shrink, continue to be easy, and continue to play the version of yourself that is convenient for them. The moment you stop, the distance begins. You see this clearly in relationships you once thought were ironclad. The day you stop playing along with toxic narratives just to keep the peace, the day you stop being the ever-ready void filler for others, everything changes. The invitations dwindle, the messages fade, the closeness reveals its hidden conditions. Your old reflexes will urge you to soften just a bit, to return to your former compliant self just to keep them. But in that exact moment, you must realize you are facing a test of growth. If you return to compromise just to hold on, you haven't saved a relationship. You've sabotaged the very filter your maturity worked so hard to build. Many people leave simply because they can no longer profit from your old self. They are not used to a person with boundaries, a person who places self-respect above the fear of loss. Therefore, their disappearance is not evidence that you have become difficult. It is evidence that you are no longer exploitable. Each departure is a filtration process. It separates those who truly cherish your soul from those who were merely attached to the convenience you provided. The hardest lesson is non-resistance. Do not chase, do not over-explain, do not try to salvage what only existed through your silent endurance. Some doors close without a sound, and that silence is the sign that it is time. A mature soul does not view the exit of others as a reason to diminish themselves again. They simply accept it, the way a tree lets withered leaves fall when the season turns. No blame, no drama, just the understanding that some things must leave, so the truest part of you has room to grow. Part 9. Loving from wholeness, not lack. What fills the void after a parting is not the hurried arrival of someone new, but the ability to return to and replenish yourself. Many enter love while still in a state of internal disarray, carrying unhealed wounds and unnamed hungers. They aren't seeking companionship, they are searching for a savior to rescue them from their own emptiness. When love starts from a need for salvation, it becomes an exchange of pressure. You must make me feel whole. I must make you feel worthy. Carl Jung noted that the most terrifying thing for a person is to accept themselves completely. Yet only when we dare to walk through that fear can we love healthily. If you cannot be alone and be at peace, you will inevitably turn love into a shelter for your internal panic. Socrates warned that the most intense infatuations are often the most fragile because they are built on the obsession of possession, not on freedom. Any relationship built on fear will eventually buckle under its own weight. Conversely, the deepest connections emerge when two people do not use each other to fill holes, but stand together from their own individual fullness. There is a distinct beauty in those who love from wholeness. They do not enter a relationship with hands outstretched, begging for a rescue. They enter with a nurtured inner life, a solid foundation, and a peace that does not depend on who stays. They do not love to escape loneliness. They love because they wish to share the life they already possess. Freedom in love begins when you no longer need another to confirm that you are worthy of being loved. Make your own cup run over first. Learn to be alone without being lonely. Soothe your own wounds and take responsibility for your own inner stillness. When you do, the love you give is no longer a plea to be kept, but a gift offered from abundance. You do not need someone to complete you. You are simply opening your life to someone mature enough to walk beside you without depleting your soul. From this point, your aura changes. You no longer love in fear. You no longer cling in panic. You no longer trade your dignity for a connection. You become serene, deep, and free. And when a person moves through the world with that energy, they create a quiet yet irresistible magnetism. The magnetism of someone who no longer needs to be saved and therefore can no longer be manipulated. After all those times you've painstakingly peeled off your old masks, moved through the turmoil of rebuilding your boundaries, and learned to replenish your own inner void, you will arrive at a very different kind of strength. It is not boisterous. It is not performative. Nor is it born from the incessant need to prove anything to the world. It comes from the moment you truly realize that you are already enough. You no longer live for recognition. You no longer play a role to be liked. And you no longer chase the gaze of others as if your worth were held in their hands. When you begin to prioritize respect for your authentic self over the fear of rejection, the world around you will shift. Mismatched connections will quietly fade. Pretense will no longer find a place to take root. And those who truly resonate with you will not demand that you shrink to fit their limits. They will meet you at that level of authenticity, or they will grow to be worthy of walking beside you. This is when your significance no longer lies in how many people choose you, but in the fact that you no longer betray yourself to keep anyone. If these words have touched a hidden part of you, do not let this awakening slip away as it has before. Leave a comment about the mask you've decided to discard today. Like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who is weary of living according to others' expectations. Stoic Journey does not exist to lull you with sweet talk. It exists to walk with you on the journey back to yourself, slow, conscious, and deep enough to change the way you live. And if you are ready, move on to the next video on your screen. Because true transformation doesn't begin when the world finally sees you. It begins the moment you stop running from yourself.